I don't think we say this enough, but we're in the home of, well, probably the moral capital of America, Atlanta, Georgia. And I don't think we say enough how extraordinary things are that have become normal. You have just been announced, with the exception of me and Simon, two of the most extraordinary positions in the country happen to be filled by women. Kudos. I don't know if it's obvious to you how difficult it is to pull this off, but we're still in the middle of a pandemic. People are still getting COVID. Several of our speakers had, including my co-host, who is in Washington, D.C. My team has been able to get just the right number of people in a room without you being too close to the person next to you, so you're like pushing them or you away. I hope you found it an elegant, smooth experience where you didn't feel people were on top of you. And then combine that with the new digital world we live in, where really you have hundreds of thousands of people who are watching this online around the world. This wasn't even a thing before 2020. No one did these digital combinations before that. The world's changed, we've adapted with it. I hope you appreciate that my team, Kevin Boucher, Lance Triggs, all of them, done such an extraordinary job. We're wrapping this up, we're bringing this home, we're about to conclude this day. This has never happened before. This meeting of those in cryptocurrency and the digital asset space has been historically promoters meeting over here. Those who are for and religiously professing the merits only of this space as if it's perfect. And then you have meetings of those interested in protection and structure, meeting really privately behind closed doors in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, and saying almost nothing because they're trying to find the perfect answer. Never before has there been a collection of prosperity and protection in the same place, having a conversation that essentially says, as you heard today, we're better together. It's a historic meeting. You've been a part of it. This is the beginning, not the ending. There's some special announcements that we'll be making before this is over that will underscore this. Again, hope you have enjoyed it. They've given me some talking points, which I'm going to ignore. This is the future, then they literally, this is the future of the future. And there are no, I know you can go back. I want Simon to, I enjoy my talking points, but everybody else probably needs them. And I want to make sure that for the audience's sake, that we're teeing this up properly and our panelists are having an opportunity to truly engage and contribute in a way that they find meaningful. This is the Wild West. We're making the new rules. We talked earlier about the cautions. We've tried to tap on the brakes. Now, if we're gonna go forward, what does that look like? I think we've agreed we should go forward. What does that look like? Simon and I had a passionate conversation just yesterday where he said, well, I disagree with you, John. And I said, well, I disagree with you, Simon. And we ended up at the end of it agreeing to agree on the most important things. We're just coming up the mountain on different sides. That's what you want. You want to talk without being offensive, listen without being defensive, and always leave even your adversary with their dignity. Because if you don't, they'll spend the rest of their life trying to make you miserable, and you don't learn anything. As I listened to Simon, I remember I had 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I listened twice as much as I talked. And then Simon listened to me. And I think we both left smarter. Simon, you believe that we should let innovators innovate. Do you think we need any kind of safeguards around that innovation? you know what my opinion is about that, Simon. Simon?
So, John, first of all, let me say thank you so much for having me.
He's a genius, by the way.
To be here. I'm sorry I couldn't join you in person, but this is a subject that I think we absolutely need to engage on. So, first of all, maybe for the benefit, or second, for the benefit of the audience, a little about me and what I do and the point of view that I represent. So, I work for a company called ConsenSys, and what ConsenSys does is essentially two things. We have a set of software services that, first of all, help developers who are building the innovations that are what you would consider Web3 innovations, so DeFi innovations or new types of metaverse innovations, NFTs, like a lot of the buzzwords that you've probably heard. We provide the platform that developers are using to build, test, launch, scale these types of applications. And then the second thing that we do is we provide a product called MetaMask. And MetaMask is a tool that 30 million consumers use to interact with these innovations. It's a digital wallet that people use to not just store their cryptocurrency, but more importantly, we think, to express their digital authority.
So hold on one second, Simon. So
You
just heard 30 million people use this platform. It is one of the most important companies you've never heard of before in your life. I just found out about them recently through Sarah Fryer, who's a board member, both of Operation Hope and of his company. He's a genius. The founder is likewise really smart. But this is a whole other world. He just mentioned 30 million people, right? Users?
That's right. That's right. 30 million users who are using this digital authority manager to engage with NFTs, DeFi, stable coins.
Hey, Simon, we need to drop the jargon. Simon, do me a favor.
no.
You're a genius. I need you to unpack this stuff a little bit. First of all, we're going to need to get through the introductions real quickly so we can get to the meat. People can Google whatever search engine you want to use. But when you're talking, if you could just let's get the jargon out of it and assume nobody knows what a DeFi is or et cetera, et cetera.
So do we need safeguards? So without a doubt, like I'm a European, I live in California, I've worked in Silicon Valley for almost 25 years now, but I still grew up believing that the government and regulators have a role to play in protecting consumers and into saving ourselves from our worst instincts. That's thing one. I guess thing two is innovation needs to work, right? It needs to innovate. It's a dynamic, emergent process. I love what one of the previous panel speakers said about people don't want to be protected into being poor. Like, the single best way to stop any of the problems that come out of innovation is to make innovation impossible, right? Okay, great, no more problems, right? And I think of, the need for innovation and regulation to coexist is very important. But I also feel like, there are bad actors out there and probably two lenses I would kind of urge us to, in a robust way, go after bad actors. And then I would urge us to work together to think about how do we prevent the bad situations from happening as we get started, rather than putting in place kind of onerous frameworks that make it impossible for bad situations to ever happen because the innovation just doesn't happen.
So, Kate, you've got one of the coolest and most intimidating jobs in the federal apparatus. What are the things people should be aware of from a security perspective? Are things as safe as they seem?
It's a good question. So for people that don't know, I work at the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Our mission is to safeguard the financial sector from illicit finance. All that we do is try to bring identity into the system.
So basically, you're like a James Bond job.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
No.
I'm just trying to translate this. You at Treasury Department?
I'm at the Treasury Department.
U.S. Treasury Department.
We're a regulator.
Right.
And we write rules for the financial sector about bringing identity in.
And are you the chief identity officer?
I am the chief identity.
For the whole country?
For the whole regulator.
Pretty cool.
So I'm the first among the regulators that's focusing in on digital identity. And FinCEN's whole bit is about bringing identity into the system. And most of us have paper plastic identities, which mean proving who you are in a digital world is challenging. So I was brought in to help think about Simon, who's building infrastructure. Like, we need a building block. We need to be able to prove who we are in a digital world. And there are lots of solutions out there. And we're really excited because there's starting to be some government identity services like state mobile driver's license, Homeland Security's doing verifiable credentials. And so we are thinking about how in our regulations and our reporting requirements, how they need to change and modernize to enable people to prove who they are in a digital world, so that you can trust the people that you're interacting with, the counterparties, the institutions. And these compliance requirements, all that information, it might be helpful to financial institutions as they think about their customers, right? Knowing your customer better means that you can serve them better. So there is a purpose to it.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about the know your customer rule within the banking sector. Like, there's an obligation to know who your customer is, and there are repercussions to the banks if they don't, financial repercussions. You got a bad job. I mean, like a good job. I mean, like cool.
Well, we think it'll, as we move into a digital world, imagine that you had an updatable digital identity, that when you rocked up somewhere, it was cryptographically bound in your phone, and
when you did what? Somewhere? Rocked up somewhere?
Well, you could go into the TSA checkpoint in the Phoenix airport now.
Did you just use slang?
I'm allowed, right? I mean, you did invite Killer Mike to the panel. He's not here.
So she told me she's listened to like 12 Killer Mike songs and 2 albums.
I read them. I didn't listen to them. I'm looking for identity, right? You need your hook. Most people go to sleep when I talk.
Okay, all right. Sorry, back to what you were saying. Go ahead.
So imagine if you had in your phone an identity that could prove who you were, and it was cryptographically bound. So it meant it was safe and private, and there was a token-based exchange. It might be a way to prove yourself. It might solve some of the issues that we have, that maybe someone could make a fraudulent driver's license and try to prove who they were.
And does this also interact with possibly where cryptocurrency and digital assets are going? I see these worlds sort of converging. Is that possible?
Well, you need to prove who you are, and you want to be able to reliably interact with your counterparties. And so, yeah, we think there's an entire infrastructure which Simon's building, right? Single-handedly.
Yeah.
And this is just one of those building blocks that you need in order to enter in this new infrastructure, to be able to reliably interact and have a positive experience.
So I'm gonna warn you, what I'm about to say might be stupid, but I do that. A friend of mine last night, who owns a company here in Atlanta, called me because somebody professing to be him convinced a bank to wire $250,000 out of his account.
Oof.
And by the time he caught it, it had gone to another bank, and he trying to catch it before it gets out of the country halfway around the world. They tried to get 1.3 million. That didn't work, but they did get the $250,000. Is it too powerful to suggest if your work is successful, he would, in the next few years, have some kind of digital answer where his identity is almost perfected, where that would not get transferred out unless he confirmed it?
So that's the hope. What I would say is that identity is tough, right? Because at any point in time, if you have a compromise, then it undermines the integrity of your identity. You know, it could be at the verification stage. You could have compromise. You could have someone come and impersonate you. So it's making sure that throughout the chain, it's safe. But conceptually, yes, if you had a trustworthy identity as you present yourself, because when that payment went out, any payment has 3 fundamental things in it. There's the identity bit. They have to authenticate that it's actually the right person. There is the transaction record. In crypto, it could be a block. In legacy payments, it could be a book entry accounting. And then there's a value transfer. In crypto, there's a transfer. In legacy payments, some of the time they net a bunch of payments together, so there may not even be a transfer. But identity is at the heart of financial services. And so what I'm at FinCEN trying to do is to work with our regulator partners, federal agencies, the private sector, to make sure that we're engaging and learning about new solutions and thinking. You know, Congress mandated the agency that I work for to go out, take a bunch of comments, and modernize our framework. We were set up on the back end of 9/11, and regulators were mandated and putting in place regulations to identify customers to protect the financial sector from anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism, and fraud. And so we are in the process of modernizing that framework, and I'm kind of lucky to be joining on a topic that I think will lead to innovation, inclusion, create efficiencies. There's a whole lot of things that it can bring, but it's infrastructure that needs to be built.
And you're on both sides of this conversation. You're on the protection side, which is where it started with after 9/11. Now you're on the prosperity side, trying to perfect what Simon and others are, and Lee and others are professing. Lee, you've been with us all day, absorbing all of this. You're passionate, you care deeply. You've come from a rural background, I'm told, somewhat of a financial services desert in these areas, very much like the urban core as well.
Right.
People don't realize that there's more poor whites in America than poor anybody else. Little known fact. How has the sort of that background of yours informed your work at the Federal Reserve and in your current role?
Sure. First, thanks for having me today. It's been an amazing conference. And
have you also studied Killer Mike's songs?
I have not studied Killer Mike's songs, sorry. Don't tell him that, he's not here. And I will answer your question, but I think there's 3 things that have happened in my life that really informed my career, and that is that I'm super passionate about financial inclusion. So the first is what you mentioned in the intro, which is I grew up in Kansas. My first job was as a bank teller at Augusta Community Bank and Trust, and that was the only bank for a large region in the state. So we had people coming from all over to have those banking relationships. And that was a powerful thing because I also saw that there weren't a lot of banks in a lot of places, and people had to use their entire day to travel to make transactions. The second experience was when I was at the Federal Reserve. I was a compliance examiner. So I went out to look at Community Reinvestment Act, redlining issues, et cetera. And I saw a lot of discrimination in traditional financial services. And then the third is that I'm passionate about financial inclusion, obviously, and I'm just looking for ways to kind of push forward on the system. And so that's what drew me to Plaid, and that's in my current role. So I lead US policy at Plaid. Plaid's a fintech company, but what we are is we provide the data connectivity between apps, fintech apps, consumers, and their banks. And we do it very transparently and focused on consumer trust. And so that was super critical for me as I looked for my next role, is that I worked in an organization where I could push forward financial inclusion for all types of people. And at Plaid, what we're seeing in the data is that fintech adoption is working, right? We've gotten to mass adoption. I think from last year to this year, we saw from 58% of people use apps regularly to 88% of people. So everyone's using them. But we're also seeing really creative new financial services come to light that address some of the systemic problems. So Perhaps you don't have a traditional credit history. We're now exploring alternative ways to prove your creditworthiness with some of our customers. You and I work on Project Reach together with
Yep.
the OCC. That's another avenue where we're pursuing that.
Yep.
I'm seeing people who come from backgrounds, that aren't represented in traditional finance find a pathway into financial services through using our technology because we make it easy. And so we support Fortune 500 companies, John Deere, Tesla, some large banks, but also 2 people in a garage solving a problem that only they know because it only exists in their community. But there's so many more like them across the world.
Tell the audience in simple terms what it is the company does.
What Plaid does?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're the data connection. So if you go on Venmo and you want to connect your bank account, we're the ones in the middle connecting the information and flowing the information between the 2 apps. So if you're a developer, what we do is we make it easy for you to develop something like Venmo or maybe a program for Hispanic immigrants, right?
You're the backbone.
Infrastructure.
You're the
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Right. Yeah.
Simon's also the infrastructure, right?
It's the fun, boring stuff.
Huh?
I said it's the fun, boring stuff.
Right. And on the and then you're trying to help as folks flow through that pipe. You're trying to help make sure that it's identified for the proper recipient and all the folks involved in that transaction. You're almost like the confirming agent.
Yeah, and also just making sure that the sorry. Oh, hi.
Fashionably late. How you doing, brother?
Well, I've been back there for a minute. You just kept talking.
Ladies and gentlemen, Killer Mike.
How y'all doing? Thanks for having me. Atlanta won the day, and my cousin-in-law is watching, reminding me I'm late. Hello to Michael out.
I want the shoes.
Thank you. These are Nike, I think, sent these to me.
What's if my size?
These are, I buy just shoes I couldn't afford as a child. So your shoes are probably much more expensive and better tailored.
No, both is true. I couldn't afford these as a child. Kate here knows all your lyrics from your songs, and she works for the U.S. Treasury Department.
It's a pleasure to be.
And you got a problem because she's in the identity business.
Okay.
No, but he's in the identity business too, because in Scared Straight, you wrote, "They stole my money
I did.
and my credit card. I'm poor now."
You do know my lyrics.
Okay, this is our first ever meeting on
This is amazing.
many fronts. We've had a Treasury official quote rap lyrics.
Yeah, this is the second time I've been pleasantly surprised by a Treasury official. I said a few years back, when the black economy is stronger, the greater economy is stronger, because like all groups of people, you spend more money as you have more resources. And someone from the Feds chimed into a Wall Street Journal or something and said, he was right about that. So I was like, maybe I should have went to the Fed instead of rapping. But it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Well, given that you know how to count your money, I think you are part of the Fed while you're rapping. So, Mike, when we were together with Tony Ressler in L.A., you had an identity issue. I want to get to our topic, but I want to draw an analogy because I think she's the chief identity officer for the whole country through the Treasury, and when we were in this gated community in L.A. and we were having lunch and Mike was late and he couldn't get through the gate.
Yeah.
And we're like, what's the problem? Well, he doesn't have an ID.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? How could you not have an ID? And he had a very good answer for it, and I was stunned. And hopefully, the work she's doing is going to solve this for you. Can you tell them why you couldn't?
Well, I don't show ID because This man is worth far more money than me.
Blah, blah.
I would more likely be robbed at a gas station because people see me on television. They see me singing and dancing. They see jewelry or watches, and they assume that I keep it all in my basement. And having your physical address means I can follow you home. I can show up. If I post a picture from vacation, thieves know now's the perfect time to break. So I tend to just refuse to show my ID and my wife based on that, because I don't want to be prey for a potential predator. And the guard he acted like he didn't understand. And then I just reminded him, I am on television. You already know who I am. But we can Google me if you want to know who I am, but I can't show you my home ID, because in LA, unfortunately, people like Smoke Perp or other people have been robbed, just by simply saying an
By the security guard.
Yeah, security, because what happens is someone who works a regular job, they're being underpaid, they don't get what they deserve. They have someone on the outside, they let them know. It's just like watching the Goodfellas. And, the truck driver shows up, gets out of the truck, gives them the truck. And I was robbed. So I try my best to stay out of those positions. Yeah.
So he looked really smart. I told him off when he got to lunch, but he looked really smart. He looked really dumb when he told everybody why he was late. I just shut up for the rest of the lunch. But she has a solution for you.
What's the solution?
A mobile driver's license. You upload your real ID, a selfie, the DMV verifies it, cryptographically binds it in a wallet. When you need to present it at TSA, I think they're accepting it at the Phoenix airport.
I would love that.
All you do is do a token-based exchange, and it only sends the information they need.
That makes
so they
sense.
don't need your address.
I like that. I like that a lot better.
And I'll take my fee through crypto or cash after it's all.
And since I use my sister's address, I definitely don't want her house getting robbed.
Okay, so Mike, first of all, thank you for being here. Love you. I love you very much. Mike is not only brilliantly talented as an artist, and he and me and Mike, myself, and T.I., we have a lot of these conversations together. Mike is brilliant. He cares deeply about his community.
Absolutely.
He's a good father. He's a good husband. Go on his Instagram and see what he posts about. It's all purpose driven. He gave me a quote that lives in my heart. You may not remember you said this to me. It was 4 o'clock one day. I know exactly where I was on the freeway. You said, John, rapping and artists and all that's beautiful. But black folks need an outsized business success image of ourselves that does not come from rap or professional sports, because it's not scalable.
Absolutely.
We need it, and I thought that was just brilliant. And one of many brilliant things he said to me, and he wants to own. He recently bought some real estate for his wife for an anniversary, and bought some more. I mean, he's just a wonderful human being, and he's also a co-founder with
Ryan and Paul with
Greenwood. Just did a historic transaction. About the Gathering Spot. So why, and Ryan, who's a new father, God bless you, Ryan, you're watching this, he's of the Gathering Spot with us in spirit. So Mike, you've been really active in all things capitalism and free enterprise for yourself and the community, traditional and also, I imagine, digital. And why is this so attractive, this digital currency space, so attractive to African Americans in particular?
Well,
we've come into this with like both feet, both hands. Explain it, unpack this.
Well, we've missed a few boats. So if you look at, deprohibition in the 30s, when deprohibition happened, we missed the liquor boat. When marijuana deprobated about 20 years ago, we've missed the marijuana boat. So when the guy at the gas station started talking about crypto before asking me for $5 real, I decided to start listening, because I'm like, usually their ears are to the ground a little better than mine. So I remember hearing about over and over again, like this crypto thing. So finally, my manager calls me out of nowhere, and he's like, you need to talk to Ian. Ian is a friend of mine who kind of discovered music streaming, and he worked for Louis Vuitton and Moet, and he had a pretty high position. But he and I just began a series of conversations where he's like, we don't have it all figured out yet. This is what I know about Bitcoin. This is what I know about Ethereum. He says, but this is what I do know, and I think we need to hold a series of 10 conversations with people who are experts. And we're about to do that. So you look out for a podcast of some sort for me to just come talk to people who do know. Because my grandmother, taught me, if you're ignorant, ask, right? And I'm ignorant in the space, but what I do know is when Bitcoin asked me to do a show and pay me a lot of money, I asked them to pay me half in Bitcoin. Because I say if everyone is agreeing that this thing is going to be something, it's going to be something. All of this reality is here simply because we agreed upon it, right? There was a time when televisions couldn't have existed, the stage couldn't exist, but at some point human beings sat down together and agreed upon it and improved upon that thing and improved upon that thing. And what I'm knowing is when I bought CDs 25 years ago, I could never imagine that every piece of music I've ever owned would be in my telephone. To my daughter, that's as normal as the day is long. So I'm a believer in what the people are moving toward. And what it seems like in my community and beyond is that people are moving in a digital space and digital currency. When you talk about Greenwood as a bank, it's not a traditional bank. It's a fintech company that allows you to move in a digital space, that allows you to move money quickly, that allows you to take care of exchanges and not have a knot of cash in your hand and not have to worry about getting your hit over the head at the airport or at the gas station rather. So for me, I'm a believer in where the people are going. And what I saw around me in the industry and outside the industry and people that I'm talking to is that we're going to get there. I don't know if we'll get there in 2 years. I don't know if we'll get there in 5 years, but that's where we're headed. So I jumped on the train, not fully knowing everything, but knowing that the train is going somewhere and it's going to be in a non-traditional way. And I started learning because I started seeing artists put up NFTs and things of that nature. And I'm like, why does Snoop Dogg care about selling a picture of a monkey? Well, Snoop is one of the greatest scales of what is possible and what is not, because he's like Willie Nelson. Everyone knows him. He's everywhere. And what it helped do with people like him in that space was determine, well, how much is something worth digitally? How much is something worth in the metaverse? When I first heard about the metaverse, it was a black woman. Her name is AKA Anundrum on IG. She talked about a virtual black mall, and she gave me and my wife a space in there to have a virtual haircut place for a franchise that we have called a Swag Shop. I didn't really understand it. A lot of people signed up for it because she has always been ahead of the curve on things. But the crazy part was when the guy from Facebook, Zuckerberg, comes out with it, the world goes crazy. I'm like, so now everyone believes in an imaginary place where we can buy imaginary clothes and cars.
My wife bought an imaginary condo last
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if that many people believe
I can't visit.
That's the power of imagination. If that many people are believing and we're going in that space, I jumped on the boat because I know we're going in that space. And of course, some of the investments I've made have taken a hit over the last few weeks, but I have faith that long term, that as human beings want to be more private about their money, they want less of their money to be interfered with by outside sources. I think that the digital space is the space they're going to live. And if I'm assuming right, I probably should try to do more in that space and not less.
The world's going digital.
So Mike, you weren't, you know what I'm about to say next. That's all good. You and Shadra and Shana, you guys are on this cutting edge. Your wife, my wife. But crime in this area, fraud, was up 500% last year.
Yep.
The crushing news from last week meant that there was suicide watch all on the Terra stream on Reddit. You got people putting their rent money and every dime they have in this, which is just not smart.
Nah.
Because they have a surviving mindset and they're trying to get rich overnight.
Yeah.
And so what group, Simon, I want you to be in this conversation. Maybe you can go first, and I want all of us to opine. How do we create an environment of good outcomes while protecting people from the bad ones? Simon, you first, and then...
Of course. Hey, so...
Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, so the first thing I say is actually the metaverse is already here. I'm joining you from the metaverse. You have no conclusive proof I even exist. Like, this is a digital experience for us. So,
Yeah, you might be a bot.
Who knows? So two things that I think we need to kind of focus on to create good outcomes. The first one, I think it's incumbent upon the industry, including my company, to work on surrounding people who are engaging with this stuff with good information that's highly available, information that's comprehensible, explained in terms that people understand, and information that's trustworthy. Like, the internet as an information domain, I think, has a long way to go in terms of establishing the right sort of signals that this is believable information, this is not. This is good advice, this is not. So we're doing a number of things around that, and I think part of it is around digital identity, part of it is around regulations. So that's a whole mess of things. The second thing I think, is around kind of regulatory. It's not my domain, not a regulator, not a lawyer, but it is about regulations, and it's about regulatory clarity, right? It's just about, can we get the bare minimum for what are the rules? Because in the absence of that, it creates an enormous amount of uncertainty, and actually a playing field where companies like mine don't even really know. We're trying to second guess what are the right places to push and what are the right places to stand back from. And I think if we can get a clearer set of rules that we can all live by, then we can actually move forward.
So, Kate, Lee, I'm going to come back to you last on this. Think about, because I want you to give us a structural framework for this conversation. I'm still on aspiration here for a minute. As I'm looking out at the audience, Dr. Dalton, 22nd largest black-owned business in America, when he came up, pharmacist, he and two of his partners created what we now know would be Rite Aid. And they grew it from 40 locations to 4,000, and most of his wealth was in Rite Aid stock, one stock. Then he migrated, but it was all stock or it was real estate, period. And you call that old school if you want, but there's a whole bunch of wealth tied to, that's most of the wealth in the world. His daughter had the opportunity to be more liberal, if you want to call it, because dad was conservative. And so now she's more bold. So she does a traditional real estate, so on and so forth, diverse stock portfolio. Of course, she beat me over the head now about Bitcoin every 20 minutes because she's part of the future. And when I get through get beaten up over the head by her, then your wife beats me over the head about it too. What Tanya Sams was here a moment ago, and she was saying, even though she's from entertainment, whatever, she said, don't put more than 20% of your asset and income into crypto. It's not smart. She said that. I think it was really important for her to say that. You're one of the opinion makers in this world. We just heard you advocate for it. I also know you have a diverse portfolio. Yeah. Break this down without getting into confidentiality. What do you want people to hear about how they should be intelligently looking at crypto and digital assets with regard to their overall portfolio?
Exactly what you just said to me. I tend to be more conservative because my grandfather told me very young, don't think you can own anything you can't measure. You can measure land, so you can own land. So I've put a lion's share of my investments have been in real estate and buying dirt. I bought my wife a bunch of S&P 500s and continue to do that because, again, my grandparents taught me when I was very young. First two stocks they bought me was Coca-Cola and Delta because they were located right here in Atlanta and you could see the growth. Dumbest thing I ever did was sell my stock freshman year. Now when I buy stock, I look at this as something I'm going to have for life, probably going to pass on to my children. I'm not going to worry about cashing anything out. So real estate and stock.
Buy and hold.
When it came to digital, Shaquille O'Neal gave me that advice. My friend Ian gave me that advice, and a few other people. Don't put more than 20% into it because you're the beta group essentially. You're testing it out, and in terms of just you don't know how safe it is. It took banks being robbed by John Dillinger for banks to figure out maybe we should put plexiglass up. It took the credit card scammers of the early 2000s that helped a lot of rappers buy their cars for credit card companies to readjust. Thankfully, one of the larger banks that I stayed with is Chase. If I'm out of state and I try to buy some bubble gum, their fraud department is calling me. And they've done that because of, scamming and frauding. So for me, I still do the lion's share in traditional things that are land, things that are stocks and bonds. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, what I said when they called me and say, hey, we'd like to give you over $100,000 to sing and dance, I said, fine, give me half of that to sing and dance and pay me in money and pay me the other half in crypto, and I'll see where the ride goes. So even some of my first investments were based on just leveraging what companies want from me. So now when I get calls in, I get an opportunity to say, well, take 20% of that and pay me in this. But I'm a follower of the 20% rule because it doesn't expose you. And I don't believe in the lottery mindset in terms of investing. The lottery mindset is I'm going to put this in and within 1 year or two, I'm going to pull out a fortune. I wasn't fortunate enough to have money and ring like Big Boy. I wasn't, I didn't catch a building that I could turn into 147 apartments like my friend T.I. So I tend to be very conservative with mine. So 20%, and if you have less than that, I would say even 10 or 15, but don't give a company more than you're going to give the Lord for a tithe, I guess.
Oh, amen. Amen. And what I've said is don't bet your rent money.
Yeah.
Don't bet your rent money. Don't bet something you can't afford to lose. And really,
And form clubs. I was a young man from Morehouse stopped me in a bar the other night when I was with my wife. He said, well, what's the piece of advice you would give me? I said, something that I didn't do. There was a group of young men buying real estate in Southwest Atlanta when I was at Morehouse. And because I didn't value Southwest Atlanta enough in my mind, because I grew up there, I grew up on the west side, but I took it for granted, I was not a part of that group. I got in on doing it 15, 20 years later. By that time, those guys were already millionaires. And so for me, I would just say, if you don't have enough to cover your rent, find some other people to partner with, and then create a club. And then that for me, there's a safety in groups, because you get a chance to hash out the good and bad ideas, and you tend to make better decisions when you actually plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize with other people versus just sitting at your kitchen table using your rent money like a lotto.
And you're asking hard questions about people trying to separate you from your wallet to make sure you're not
Absolutely,
playing.
you are.
Absolutely.
Or you just have that friend that's just always brutally honest, and that's going to give you the question you don't want to ask yourself. You need that. That's the power of. Sometimes I call John. Most of the time, I call John out here. It's not a good idea. All right, it's not a good idea this time. This is why, it comes from Mike. This is the mistake I made 30 years ago, and I value that advice because he's stopping me from walking off the side of a cliff. So I would say, man, get yourself some people, get a diverse group of people around you. And when I say that, just 5 friends who may think 5 different ways, but you guys are dedicated toward doing something. I think his dedication is there, and if you're plotting, planning, strategizing, organizing, and mobilizing, I think that you'll start to see gains. And don't look to do it all yourself. You can't do anything alone. The power of connection is priceless. The power of networking is priceless. And the power of mentorship. Find a mentor, not only for you, but for that group. I think it's something that a lot of us can do.
Natalia's brilliant. All right, Lee, we're bringing this home. I want Lee, Kate, and Simon. What's the takeaway for this question? What does the future hold? How do we have good outcomes while protecting people from bad ones?
Right.
And where are we talking about 5 years from now? Let's bring it home.
Okay. So I think there's a lot to learn from the evolution of fintech here, and particularly I'd point to 2 things that I think have somewhat been missing in the crypto space, but we're seeing greater transparency and consumer trust. So how do we get there, right? Being really upfront with consumers about what they're signing up for, and giving them tools to maybe revoke that access or that data transfer later on. So there's a lot in fintech that we've learned, but we've seen with greater and greater adoption that now more than 70% of people say the more apps that they connect with, the more they trust the system. So you've got to get those touch points in places that are non-risky so that people can kind of build that muscle. The other thing we're seeing is that minority groups are more likely to use fintechs for financial emergencies than a traditional bank. Yeah. So obviously there's been spaces that have been historically underserved that we're filling the gaps here in tech. I'm really excited about what Web3 and crypto, can offer. I think the vision is great, but it's going to take some, easier, more manageable steps for a normal person to take to get into the market and start to feel comfortable over time, where they feel like they've got true transparency about what they're signing up for and can trust the system.
Okay, I'm gonna hold you to the last, Kate. Simon, you wanted to jump in here about either good outcomes or protecting people from bad ones, the future 5 years from now?
Sure. Look, one of the things that I have enduring faith in, and I really appreciate about the community of builders that I work with, is there is a level of defiant optimism that absolutely imbues this space, defiantly optimistic about, in a world that is struggling in many ways, we can make it better. And not a kind of political point of view, it's just a kind of young, it's really early in this space, there are outcomes here, and a sort of energy that's really kind of propelling us forward. So, I would urge kind of people to engage with the space with that in mind. There is naivety there. There is kind of lessons that are going to be learned the hard way, but that level of just youthful optimism is really infectious, and it's really what I think is going to drive us ahead.
Thank you, Simon.
Defiant optimism.
Defiant.
Good.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a new song for you, brother.
Defiant optimism.
Kate?
I think we're stronger together. You know, I was brought in with 3 mandates to figure out what we at FinCEN could do to advance the use of digital identity. My second job was to go out and partner. So we just finished a tech sprint with the FDIC trying to figure out how we could help build some of this infrastructure in digital identity. We had innovation hours where we invited companies to come in and present all their solutions. We went out to the public and we said, tell us what we should be doing. This is working together. It's going to take the intellect and the creativity of all of us to solve this stuff. It's not easy, and it's going to be working together to build all these building blocks together.
I can't think of a better way to end this panel. Have you enjoyed this? We have one more session, I think, and we're going to conclude. This has been fantastic. I will tell you, my takeaway from this is when I come to Washington, D.C., and I jump in the real car, not the Meta Universe automobile. When I jump in the real car for Kate, I expect to hear Killer Mike rocking on the radio. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee, Simon, Kate, Killer Mike, a.k.a. Michael Render. Love you guys.
Such a